Welcome, University of Arizona alumni, students, and friends, to our online career workshop, brought to you tonight by the Alumni Career and Professional Development Lab. I'm Susan Kalita, Director of the Career Lab. I'm very excited about tonight's webinar, presented by UA alumnus Ralph Nader. In this webinar, Trade Secrets to Landing Your Dream Job, Ralph will lift the veil of mystery from the job application process, from interviews, and from the professional world. This is part of a free online career workshop series from the Alumni Career Lab that provides conversations with experts around career topics. Today's presentation is being recorded, and it will be archived within 1 week on the Alumni Association website for members of the association to access on demand. You can find a link to that page at arizonaalumni.com/careers. Click the online career workshops button in the upper left. There you can also find information about our future webinars. The next one is Tuesday, October 27th, Crafting Effective Summaries for Resumes and LinkedIn. Jeff Kuhn, executive resume writer and LinkedIn expert, will teach you how to write summary sections for your resume and LinkedIn profile that will show recruiters how you add value. Questions are welcome at any time during tonight's event, and they can be typed into the chat box whenever you think of them. Ralph will answer some of them as they come up during the webinar and save some others for the end. If you're on Twitter tonight, tweet about this webinar or other career topics using the hashtag #HireACat. We'd love to hear from you. Our speaker this evening is Ralph Nader. Ralph joined Viacom in 2013 to spearhead digital recruiting across Viacom's large portfolio of brands, including MTV, VH1, Comedy Central, Nickelodeon, and more. Ralph has worked in other roles in recruiting and advertising, and he is passionate about helping others reach their professional goals. He has a degree from the University of Arizona in sociology, and he's also completed graduate coursework in organizational development and leadership coaching at NYU. So big thanks to Ralph for being with us tonight and for sharing his expertise with fellow Wildcats. So now I'll turn it over to Ralph, who will tell you more about himself and how you can prepare to land your dream job.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Nice to be here back on campus after a few years. I'm happy to share some of this knowledge with you. I want to, as Susan mentioned, a great intro, by the way, I want to try to lift the veil of mystery behind the application process and finding your job and understanding the career path. I know some of you who are listening, maybe sophomores, juniors, seniors, some of you might be closer to graduation and you're experiencing some of these anxieties for the first time. So I'm here to help you sort of work through that. And let's kind of start with why I'm here. So the about me part, the so dreaded one. So I'm not going to talk about myself the whole presentation, I promise. But I graduated from U of A, and I was one of the students here that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't a pre-med student who knew that his whole career I wanted to be a doctor or anything like that. I was exploring, and like many of you will do, or like many of you have done, when I graduated, I started applying for jobs everywhere and took the best offer that came my way and hoped for the best. It ended up working out for me, but there were a lot of things that I learned along the way that I wish I had known back then that could have made my journey a lot easier and probably a little bit more efficient. So essentially that's why I'm here tonight, to talk to you guys a little bit about that. So I'm currently at Viacom Media Network. So for those of you who are not familiar with Viacom, Viacom is the company that owns Nickelodeon, MTV, VH1, Comedy Central, Spike, Paramount Pictures, BET, CMT, along with a number of other properties that are too numerous to mention. We're a large media company. I recruit for the digital arm of Viacom, so anything that touches the digital sphere, which these days is becoming much more prevalent as everything has gone digital. Previously, I was at NBC for a number of years, and NBC, I worked a number of brands there, including Bravo, Oxygen, MSNBC, and NBC News, etc. There I recruited for a lot of the creative fields, production, development, just about anything and everything. Prior to that, I was in an executive retained search firm. We'll talk a little bit about what that means, because for some of you, this will be very relevant to understand the difference between retained search and agencies, because you will probably be approached by a number of folks when you do graduate. But then I recruited in the pharmaceutical industry. So I had a little bit of a career shift going from pharmaceuticals to entertainment. For some of you who are not entertainment related backgrounds, who may want to go into entertainment, or your current educational background is not necessarily the career that you want, there is a formula to landing there. So we can talk a little bit about that. And my first job out of school, I was at an ad agency, part of the Omnicom group of agencies. And we are going to talk today about kind of setting up your plan and how you're going to tackle the job search. And part of it is finding your passion. So my special project is called Just for Education. That's a big part of what allows me to be here. So it's a group of us who got together and realized that we can offer value to people like yourself, or people who are looking to change careers. And I'm very passionate about reaching people. That was one of the things that came up as I was deciding what career to pursue. And so we created this group. So if you have any questions, or if you need to follow up or whatever, my email is on every slide, so write it down. Please feel free to reach out to me, and we can talk a little bit more. So I'm going to start the presentation, and as Susan mentioned, feel free to ask questions in real time. We want this to be as interactive as possible. We're here for you tonight, so we want you to get the most out of it. So anything that comes up, please feel free to ask, and we'll do our best to answer questions as best we can. So why are we all here? Why are you here? Ultimately, I want to show you 3 easy steps to launching your dream career. And we're going to talk about this notion of dream career and dream job as we progress. I want to show you and help you understand the recruitment process, so there's no anxieties as you tackle it, because there are a lot of things that you just don't know yet, and it's totally normal. It's totally understandable. You're not supposed to know them just yet, but hopefully you'll be a little bit more comfortable with it after we're done. And lastly, I want to show you a few steps to developing a successful career strategy overall. I find that a lot of people put a lot of their energy in focusing on the next job and really the next thing they can attain, but they forget to think long term. They forget to think about, what does this next job put me on track for down the road, and where does that lead me? So I want to show you a few ways to really think a little bit further down the road. It's a sort of 5 jobs method that I'll tackle here in a little bit. And I've got a few videos sprinkled in. So we're going to try to show you some videos. If there's any issues with sound or picture, do let us know on the comment box. That way we can rectify it. So we'll get started here. So the 3 key elements of the job search are really split into these basic buckets of creating a plan, telling a story, and taking action. And they fall in this order because I think too often people go to the second part, which is the telling the story, before they've really created a plan. And when you do that, you might be very good at sort of pitching yourself as an individual, but you're maybe not pitching yourself as the best hire for a particular position. So it's important that your plan is relevant and your plan is up to date. So I'm going to show you this clip. I don't know if you guys remember the original Austin Powers. It's a little dated now. All right, so why did I show you that? Dr. Evil in this case thought he had a good plan, but the plan was outdated. And so you do have to do a lot of research to see if the plan that you have and the pitch that you have, and we'll talk about the pitch, is relevant to the person you're talking to, the company you're talking to, and most importantly, the career path that you seek. So in creating a plan, we're going to talk about dreaming big, but planning small. We're going to talk about setting realistic expectations. There's a number of studies out there now that are showing the differences in job seekers' expectations versus reality, and it's creating a big gap that can cause a lot of frustration. And also research, how you do the research, how you create a plan that doesn't land you in the Dr. Evil spot. Number two, we're going to talk about telling your story, which is developing your pitch and creating your profile and writing your resume, your interview skills, your LinkedIn profile, your digital presence. All of that stuff will fall under the telling a story. But before you start telling a story, you really need to understand what your plan is. And lastly, we'll talk about taking action. So that's understanding the recruiting process, how to network, and most importantly, how to grow and continue to evolve in your career. So move on to the next slide. So creating a plan. I'm going to show you another clip here that I found very interesting because it's going to touch on a couple of things that a lot of millennials are going to run into when they approach the job search. So we're going to show you this real quick. Or return to slide. All right, technical difficulties. We'll move on. It's a in the clip, Jake Gyllenhaal is really trying to pitch himself, looking for a job, and he talks about the culture shift in job seekers compared to like an old school mentality versus new school mentality, and some of the things that are important these days. And so I want you to start thinking really long term about your job search and your career plans. Think about always. You are never more than 5 jobs away from your dream job. So what does that mean? If any of you today on the chat type in that you one day want to be an astronaut or that you one day want to be president of the United States, my answer to you is great. It's doable. It's possible. You're never more than 5 jobs away from it. You just have to be very strategic and very smart and very, very efficient about which 5 jobs you're going to seek in order to get there. And that's where creating your plan ahead of time, before you even start writing a resume or before you even start pitching yourself, makes such a big difference. Because if you want to get there in 5 jobs or less, you have to make sure that you're taking the 5 smartest jobs to get there. So you want to always try to identify the path of least resistance to your job and to your goal and to your career. And I don't mean the lazy path by saying that. I mean the path that's going to get you there the most effectively. And also start thinking about the distinction between finding a job and starting a career. Those are 2 very different things. If your goal today is to just find a job, you can do that. Today in the US, the unemployment rate is down to about 5%. So, 94.8% of folks out there are employed. And if your goal is to just find a job, you can absolutely do it. But if your goal is to start a career, that will take a slightly different consideration. So think of always being 5 jobs ahead and making sure that the next job you take keeps you in line for the job after that and the job after that and the job after that. And so we might have the video back, so we're going to try it one more time. Perfect. So what does he mean by that? He talks about the different generations, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about reality versus perception, and we'll also talk about his comment about working your butt off. Yes, you have to work hard, but most importantly, you have to work smart. So one thing to keep in mind before we kind of go further is this has to be your plan. There is no blueprint for getting your dream job. Meaning, two of you in this chat, so there's a number of you in here, two of you could tell me you want the exact same job and you're graduating with the exact same degree, and you will still probably have very different pathways to get there. So whatever plan you create, there is no right or wrong. Make it your own and make it efficient. What's very important is how you measure your success, and I like to measure it in milestones, because what I mean by that is many people measure success by whether or not they got a job offer, and the reality is you're going to be denied many more times than you are actually going to get an offer, and that's okay. That's normal. Most of us got turned down 10 times before somebody let us in, and you're going to apply to 100 positions before 2 even call you back. So it's okay, but don't use the offer as just your only piece of success measurement. Come up with milestones in between that are going to keep you going throughout the job search and career search process. So maybe one milestone is finding out about 2 or 3 companies that you didn't even know existed. So every week you come up with new targets, you come up with new potential career aspirations, you learn about new skill sets that you didn't even know existed. You learn about areas that are hot in the market and things that are not. Have milestones that are going to keep you engaged, because as long as you're on the right path, the job offer could take a little while. The reality is, around the US today, the average time to find a job is around 10 months. Now, that time is going to be shortened for most of you on the line, because obviously if you're here and you're paying attention to this, you're probably taking a more active step towards your career aspirations than most, and that number also includes non-graduates, et cetera, et cetera. But I only mention that because you have to set realistic expectations, and you have to set those expectations around timing. That is one of the things that you are going to want to keep in mind. So don't create a plan where you have to find success in 3 days. Create a plan where finding success could be 6 to 12 months. That way, you're better to create, under promise and over deliver type of thing, because mentally you might hit a wall if you set a goal that's too aggressive for yourself. Because the reality, and another big part of the reason I'm here is that I do want to share with you that as a recruiter, I've worked across many different platforms, many different companies. There are so many things in the recruiting process that are so completely out of your control. You could do everything right and still not get the job. And not getting the job doesn't mean that you weren't smart enough, doesn't mean that you couldn't have done it. It just means that for a reason maybe outside of your control, someone else was better suited for it. Doesn't mean they're a better person. It just means that maybe they brought something to the position that we were looking for that you didn't even know we were looking for. Maybe the job went on hold. A team lost the budget for it. Or maybe they decided to go from one team to another. There are so many things that are out of your control that you have to give yourself enough time, because at the end of the day, you're going to land a job when you're the right person at the right time in the right place. And for those 3 things to happen, you cannot give yourself a timeline, because it could happen, it could not happen quickly. So don't be discouraged, because again, unemployment's at only 5%. So 95% will find employment. And it's not going to take the full 10 months for most of you. It may take a little longer if you want to find the right job. It's going to take much less time if you just want to find a job. And so we'll talk about that. As you're setting a plan too, you have to decide, what are your goals? What are the things that are important to you in this particular moment? And again, for each of you on this presentation today, that answer is going to be different. For some of you, maybe you're in a situation where you want work-life balance. You want a job that offers you the ability to have a good life outside of work. You have a family. You like to travel. That could be a consideration. For some of you, money's a consideration, where you want to maximize your income as quickly as possible. For some of you, learning new skills could be a goal. So depending on your goal, your strategy is going to be a little bit different. Your career path could be a little bit different. So let's talk about setting expectations, because that's something that we're seeing a huge gap in the marketplace between what people think that the world is about and what they're actually finding out in the real world. So the perception is that only about 20% of graduating seniors around the US think that they will be living at home after during the first year after they graduate. The reality is almost 60% of graduates end up living at home within a year of graduation. 4 in 10 expect to have a job when they graduate. The reality is that only 1 in 10 will have a job when they graduate. So keep in mind, this is also very important as you plan, that there are certain industries that just simply do not hire out of colleges. Media, for example, it's very rare that we would pull someone that's currently in school and wait for them. Whereas if you're going into finance, a lot of the banks and the financial institutions will hire people straight out of financial programs. So it's not right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just different functions, different places might hire or may not hire. So not having a job the day you graduate does not mean you failed. It just could mean that you're shooting for a career path that just doesn't offer jobs on day one. So that's all part of setting your expectations too. So you do want to come up with contingency plans, and one of probably the most effective ways, don't let your skills get stale. So if you don't have a job on day one, and you need to wait maybe 2, 3, 4 months before you have a full-time job, make sure you find something to do in between that's continuing to grow your skill set and continuing to make you more attractive on the open market. And also be mindful of timing. I mean, there are things that are just natural processes. So for us as recruiters, May and June tend to be crazy times because so many people graduate. But the reality is we don't time our entry-level positions. There's really no place I've ever worked in my career where we timed entry-level positions with graduations. Positions tend to open in real time, meaning if there's a need for it and there's budget for it, we open it at that time, whether it's February, April, December, or May. So, you're going to have a huge influx of graduates in December and May, but that doesn't mean that you have a huge influx of jobs to be given out. So you may have to wait, and that's totally okay. So don't be discouraged by that. It's totally normal. Just plan a contingency. So that's one of the reality versus perception. The other part is around money too. How much do you expect to earn? That really depends on the type of career that you seek. Despite the fact that we know some areas are the most lucrative, for example, if you're a software engineer or something like that, that your earnings potential could be higher when you first graduate. The majority of folks going into schools today are not going into these programs. So you do have to have realistic expectations around what your earning will be at first. You can always grow. I strongly believe that if you do follow your passion, if you do find that thing that you are truly passionate about, the money will always follow. So you might be in a situation where you have to chase the money today. That's fine. That everybody has different situations. But if you have the opportunity to really follow your passion and follow the skills first, the money will always follow. So on average, in the U.S., entry level positions range between 35 and 60,000 a year. But again, you could be 60,000 could be for a computer engineer. And you could be doing less. And also, if you're freelancing, a lot of entry-level positions are freelance positions, full-time freelance. So you are working 40 hours a week, you're working 5 days a week, it's as if you're an employee of the company, but you are freelancing, which means that you could be doing overtime. There's so many variations. But, as a bar, you could kind of hope to make kind of in that range. But in reality, 1 in 3 grads will be under 25,000. And again, that's not because of anything negative other than maybe you're freelancing in 2 different places, or maybe you're not working full time. So, but again, do not be discouraged. The money will follow. It always does. You just worry about finding your passion first. Then let's talk a little bit about perception still between millennials and baby boomers. So what does that mean? The largest entering class in the US of new employees for the last few years has been millennials. And where we're finding a little bit of a disconnect is that the largest population of hiring managers are baby boomers. And they are different generations. And this is one of these times in history where we are finding a difference between baby boomers and millennials. If you want to think of it kind of in simple terms, millennials would be anybody under the age of 30 today, or right around the 30 mark, plus or minus a few years. Baby boomers are typically 45 and up. But the reason this is important to note is that there are differences in what you seek or what millennials seek versus what baby boomers seek. So for example, millennials tend to be more tech savvy, and they're using digital, and they're using softwares, they're using technology to create a more efficient work environment. A lot of millennials skew towards teamwork. It's a much flatter type organization where there's not as much hierarchy needs. And they look for immediate results. They want instant gratification. They want to move quickly. Whereas baby boomers are of the hard work, long hours. So if you just take that notion, for example, you've got a hiring manager who's looking for long hours and hard work, and you've got a candidate coming in looking to leverage the technology and not work long hours, but produce twice as much. So you have to understand those differences to be able to pitch yourself in a way that's going to make sense. And having realistic expectations, we talked about that: money, title, growth. Make sure you're selecting career paths and places where you can have the growth at the rate that you want. That's going to be very, very important for you to be successful. So I'm going to pause for just a second to see if we have any questions. So anyone? So I got a question here about, if you're not in school and you're not currently working, what are some ways to identify to continue to build your resume and your skills? Great question, and that actually applies to people that are out of school and people that are in school, because your program may be teaching you a certain set of skills, but you may realize that the thing that you want to do could require another set of skills. So if you use the 5 jobs sort of concept that I brought up, think about what are the skill sets that you need in your next job, but also 3 jobs down the line, what are the skill sets that you're eventually going to need? And those are the things that you can go get educated on. You have to identify your gaps. So you have to really take an honest look at your background and ask yourself, what are the things that I'm qualified to do? And we do find a disconnect with people, because you have to train your mind to not necessarily think in terms of what are the things I'm interested in doing and could potentially do well. You have to think of what are the things that I'm currently doing well. Those are your today skills, right? And an employer might be trying to hire you for those. And then find out the things that you're missing, and that's what you can do. So continuing education is a great way to get it. There's a number of programs out there that may teach you, like this person asked about marketing. So marketing, for example, is a field that has skewed recently a lot more towards research and analytics, looking at data to create marketing campaigns. So we may look for people that have analytics experience, some people even coming from the financial sector, or people that have experience in certain software, like SAS or Tableau, data science type things. And if you wanted to get those skills, you could do a course and at least get the mastery of that software and put that on your resume. That way, when you interview for your next position, you can say, okay, I've never held a position where analytics were important, but I understand where the market's going. I understand the needs of tomorrow. And, I put my money where my mouth is, and I actually signed up and took this class, and now I'm certified in XYZ. So that could be a good way to go. Anything else before we move on to the next slide? Cool. Tell your story. So the reason I get to tell your story second and not first is because without a plan, what story are you telling? You want to tell the story that matches the plan. The easiest really ask yourself before you even go into, I need a job and I need this career, really be honest with yourself. Who am I? And it sounds like we should be laying on a couch somewhere and having a psych session. But the reality is, it's a very valid question. You have to ask yourself, what are your values? What are the things that are important to you? Because ultimately, in order to really do well in the workplace, you're going to want to work at a place that respects your values and that matches your values, because anybody can perform anywhere for a short period of time. But when it comes to long-term growth and your own personal happiness, being in a place that it coincides with the things that you're passionate about are very important. And where are you going? Curiosity versus interest is something that I wish I had learned early on in my career. A curiosity is something that you might be interested in, but you don't yet know if you are. An interest is something that you know you're interested in and you want to pursue. Very often we find candidates who apply for jobs or approach us because of curiosities. And in reality, you don't need to take a job to find out if that curiosity is a real interest. There are so many things at your fingertips, and the Career Center here being probably the most important one at your disposal, because they can tell you what these careers are all about. They can tell you through their experiences and through their research and network, they could put you in contact with someone who may have the job that you think you're curious about. So you can understand, what's the day-to-day in that position? What does my life look like if I pursue that path, before you really commit to pursuing it. Because ultimately one of the stories that I like to hear as a recruiter is, this is where I am, this is where I'm going, this is how this position fits in my plan. And to be able to tell that story, you really need to understand where you're going, and where you're going should be an interest and not necessarily curiosity. Because the reality is, if you gear your whole plan towards a curiosity and you get into that position or you get into that career, and you don't like it, a year down the road or 6 months down the road, we're having the same conversation again to try to get you back on path. And then you go from a career starter to a career changer, which is not a problem. There's always ways to get there. But there are so many things at your disposal to see if it's a true interest, that I would really suggest creating that distinction between the two before you launch into the career search. Creating your profile. Now that's the most important part of the whole process, because that's how people are going to find you. That's how people are going to remember you. And I put this little graphic on there of, if you guys have seen the movie Taken, he has this very interesting phone conversation where he tells them, I don't know who you are, but I will find you. And for us as recruiters, we don't know who you are, but we will find you and we will try to recruit you. But in order for us to find you, you have to be findable. So you have to create a profile that is going to be searchable, just like if any of you are familiar with SEO or search engine optimization, the same way someone who's launching a website would want their site to be found in searches. You want to create your profile to where, as a recruiter, and I'm using LinkedIn or some other tools out there to find people, that your profile is going to come up in the searches that I'm running. Because we get a lot of applicants in general for jobs, but most everyone who applies to a job thinks they're qualified, but we may be looking for something special, and we do a lot of outreach on our own. So you do want to create a profile that is searchable. You want to create a profile that tells the same story that your pitch does. Creating your resume is the first step to that. So a resume, and I have this quote here, the purpose, and keep in mind that when it comes to career planning and resumes and interviews, you can ask the same question to 100 people and you may get 100 different answers. So everything that I'm telling you tonight and everything that you hear about these things, always wash it with common sense, because there is no blueprint. So your story, your needs might be a little bit different than the person sitting next to you. So you definitely want to throw some common sense in there and see how it makes sense. But to me, the purpose of a resume is to determine a candidate's suitability for a specific role. Why do I say that? I have a job open. I'm a recruiter, and I'm looking for a skill set. I'm not looking for who seems like a good person. I'm not looking for the best autobiography out there, which a lot of resumes look like autobiographies. People tend to do a great job of telling us where they're coming from, but they completely forget to tell us where they're going. And for some of you who are going to be applying for entry-level positions, keep in mind that you're unlikely to be hired for the 10 years of experience that you have coming in. You're being hired for your potential. And in order for us to see your potential, we have to understand where you're going and where you're headed. So your resume should be a collection of the things that you've experienced and done. But the way you structure your qualifications, the way you structure the bullets on your resume should reflect the job that you seek, not necessarily the job that you've had. And the best way to do that is to search job descriptions online. You don't need to apply just yet, but at least search the job descriptions. And I would even recommend, probably more so than searching for jobs that you think you're qualified for, I would search for jobs that you know you're not qualified for. So if you're currently, let's say, for example, you've been working as a marketing coordinator for the last couple of years, you may think that your next logical move is marketing manager or senior coordinator or assistant manager. So you might be tempted to look for those jobs, or on the entry level for most of you that are graduating in the next year or so, you tend to search for entry level positions. Don't do that yet. Do your research first. Don't think of entry level positions as a level. Don't think of it as, I'm a fresh grad, therefore I'm entry level. Think of an entry level position as an entry point into the career that you want. So in order to determine what the entry point is, search, as you're doing your research, search for like VP, vice president level positions, head of level positions, director level positions, positions with a title that sort of implies that this person has been doing it for a long time, because that's what's going to show you the skills that you eventually need to acquire. And that's going to help you structure your resume in a way that's relevant for the position that you seek. So once you have those massive, lists of the skill set that you'll need to acquire over the next 1, 5, 10 years, then you can really structure your resume for that entry point position that you seek. So your resume is very important. It needs to tell your story very quickly. If you're applying for big companies that receive a lot of applications, your resume may not be looked at for more than a few seconds. And so if we can't get a sense of what you're all about in a few seconds, odds are we'll move on to the next person relatively quickly. So don't make the mistake of creating a resume that needs an interview to be explained or needs a cover letter to be explained. Your resume really needs to be a standalone document that someone can really get a sense of, okay, this person is applying for this job because, okay, I get it, therefore I can talk to them. It's a matter of just volume. So make sure it's easy to read, it's quick to kind of scan and get a sense of what you're all about. Watch the formatting of your resume, because in many ways, your resume is the first writing sample that you're submitting to a company. And if there's typos or issues with formatting, it's very difficult to be in an interview and tell someone, I pay great attention to detail, if there are typos on your resume, because that's a document that you've had time to create and that you've had time to put through a QA process, that there really shouldn't be there shouldn't be any errors on that. So and just so you know, for those of you who are going to be shooting for entry level type roles when you come out, as a recruiter, a lot of the things that I look for are sort of the soft skills. So there are positions that are going to require a knowledge of a certain hard skill, like a software or technology or something like that, and that's granted. We'll need that skill. But there's a lot of positions that just require soft skills, and what I look for is attention to detail. I look for reliability. Can you do the things that you said that you were going to do? Think of it this way: as an entry-level person, usually you are going to support someone who's done it for a little bit longer and is willing to teach you something. And so in supporting them, you want to make sure that attention to detail and that reliability is there, because you are representing them in many ways. Common sense is something that we look for too. We want someone who asks a lot of questions because they want to learn, but we also want somebody who's a little bit of a self-starter and can take some initiative and is passionate about what they do. So, common sense, reliability, attention to detail, and then executive presence, right? That's something that, in short, basically executive presence is how you present in a professional environment. We know that you're fresh grads, right? And for many of you, you may have just had internships and you may not have spent a lot of time in the corporate setting. But you're still going to be in a potentially corporate setting. So we want to make sure that you present and communicate in a way that's acceptable. So that's really important. We do get a lot of questions about cover letters. Cover letters can be important, but your focus should really be on the resume, because the reality is we always look at the resume before we look at the cover letter. We get cover letters with every resume. I have yet to receive a cover letter that says, I'm not qualified, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not a great person, you should not hire me. Almost every cover letter that we get says, I'm great, I'm fully qualified for the job, this is the perfect job that I'm seeking. So we appreciate the enthusiasm, but the reality is that your resume is going to tell us more about you than your cover letter. And that goes with your bio cover letter. Again, it's a writing sample, so you want to keep it short and quick and to the point. And you want to make sure that if you are taking the time to write a cover letter, make it meaningful. A lot of people use a template, and it'll say something like, "It's always been my dream to work at your company. This position is," and we know you've used that for 15 other companies. That's fine. We appreciate the effort, but if you are going to use it, personalize it. Take that extra step. It's it takes 3 seconds and it's a save as on your Word doc. So that extra step could go a long way. And we do also get questions quite often about the objective line on the resume. The objective line is useful for some and it's not useful for others. So again, common sense. You've had 3 internships in marketing, you're applying for a marketing job, you probably don't need an objective line. That your resume, your background, what you've done tells me enough. You're a finance or accounting background and you're applying for a job in production for a TV company. Okay, I might need an objective line. I may need you to connect the dots for me in your objective line to say that, what is it about your background in finance that you're looking to leverage in this future role that you want, and why do you want that role? So 1 or 2 lines to just kind of connect the dots for me, just so at least I don't get the sense that you're only just applying to every job out there because you're desperate. I want to get a sense that you're actually thought it through. So read the. I did just get a question about should you not submit a cover letter. I can't answer that question as a generalization, because every application is going to require something different of you. So the application process, the online application, the dreaded online application that everybody calls a black hole, it's just a necessary evil, and it's a way to also know how committed you are, because there are extra steps, and we know that there are some people who just kind of mail it in, they go through the steps and apply to everything they can get their hands on, and their online application shows, it's not very well done. Others will take their time because they are really passionate about the job that they're applying for. So if a job you're applying for requires a cover letter, definitely include it. If a job that you're applying for doesn't require it and you'd like to, by all means, please do, but make it count, and keep it short and to the point. Resumes that capture our attention, that's another question that I got. It's not about the way it looks. It's really about the relevance of that resume for the job you're applying to. So I want to see that you created a resume for that position and that you took the time of highlighting the things on your resume. I mean, not in like highlight yellow, but in highlighting, sort of bringing to the forefront those skills that are most relevant for the job you're applying to. That's really how it captures my attention. I open it, it's like, whoa, this is super relevant for what I want. Now you've got the attention. And then I also got a question about how do you make yourself searchable. So we'll talk about your digital footprint right now quickly here. LinkedIn can be your best friend. So there are a number of other places out there like LinkedIn. And again, common sense. If you are a designer, an art person, LinkedIn is very useful, but you may also need to have your portfolio on a place like Dribbble or Behance or Cropped, because those are industry specific for the job that you might seek one day. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you find out what those industry specific websites and communities are, because you will want a presence there. Your LinkedIn profile is a little bit more fun than your resume because you're not capped by size and formatting. You can actually put a lot more content on your LinkedIn profile than you can put on your resume, but keep them relevant. Something that we see in media and entertainment quite a bit is we have a lot of aspiring artists who are trying to get their foot in the door. And so I'll get a resume from someone who's applying for like a research position, and they're telling me, hey, I'm really passionate about research, that's what I want my career in. And then I click on their LinkedIn profile and it says aspiring singer moving to LA tomorrow morning. Great. That's a fantastic goal to have. But those goals do need to match. So your digital footprint is very, very important. because that's how you are searchable. So make LinkedIn your best friend, create a full profile, make it count, and be searchable on LinkedIn. And it's also the best tool that you can use within LinkedIn is it gives you ideas of who to reach out to. So if you are connecting to people, add a little note. LinkedIn does allow you to put a few characters in there and just let them know, like, hey, I'm reaching out to you because, I'm applying for this job, and do you mind if and I'm attaching my resume, or I'm connecting to you because you're in the field that I'm interested in, and I'd love to pick your brain one day. The one thing that many of the people that I work with will not respond to is, do you have any jobs open, and will you consider me? It's like, well, I appreciate the effort, but I don't know you. And, you're asking me to do too much without, you really want to give me, you want to empower me to help you. So be specific about what you seek, and make sure that you are there. So connect to people, grow your network. It's a great way to meet people, great way to get to know more people. The latest stat I saw was that 60% of jobs end up going to referrals or internals. So when you think about that number, it's much better if you can be referred by someone, and you may say to yourself, I don't know anyone in the industry that I want. Great, create a LinkedIn profile, start networking, and see if that works. So in taking action, I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because I think we're running a little bit short on time. But understanding the process, we talked about applying online and selecting the right roles. Think of them as entry points again, not entry levels. Make sure you're applying for companies that are in the field that you want to be in, but don't be fooled by the brand. So there's a lot of brands out there that are easy to fall in love with, but it doesn't mean that the corporate culture of that brand will fit the things that you're passionate about. So research that. Interviews. How are we doing on time?
We can go a little late, but you have about 15 minutes.
Okay. So interviews. So I want to show you then this little clip here. For those of you who saw the movie, The Internship with Vince Vaughn. The movie itself is a little bit of a Google advertisement, but once you get over that, there are some good moments in there. All right, so why did I share this clip with you? They touch on so many things in this little clip, and first of all, I think it's kind of hilarious, but virtual interviews are a thing. A lot of companies do them. A lot of companies even are starting to do pre-recorded interviews, so be ready for it. Something that happens in the beginning of a clip where the interview starts and they're kind of talking really loud, they're trying to figure out if they're on. Your interview could be in person, could be over the phone, could be by video. Make sure you have a good connection. Make sure you're in a place where people can hear you. make sure that you have an opportunity to get across the message that you want. So be ready for that. The second thing that comes up in this video is the interviewer asks them this question about being reduced to the size of pennies and what they would do. It's a completely off the wall question. And I know a lot of recruiters who do ask these type of questions. There is no right or wrong answer for this question. We're usually looking for the way you answer the question. So in this case, he asked them, if you're reduced to the size of a penny and you're dropped in a blender, what do you do? He's looking for how is your mind being processed, right? And I actually thought their answer was fantastic because they're actually playing through the scenario of how you get out. And then they talk about the quality of blenders and how long a blender can actually blend for. And, I had a friend that used to always ask his candidates, if I drop a bowling ball in the middle of the ocean, how long does it take to hit the ocean floor? Well, how are you supposed to know that, right? Like, where's it dropped? What's the current? There's so many things that apply it. But what we want to see is, are you engaged? Are you thinking it through? What's your thought process behind that question? We have some people that, if they're faced with a question like that, they completely freeze and they don't know how to answer it. Again, there's no right or wrong way. So you're not going to be judged on getting the answer right. This is just looking at your process, because it may not cost you a job, but it helps us understand what team you might best fit in, and to be able to pair you with a team that would sort of go well. So expect the unexpected. Don't freak out. Again, no right or wrong answer. And the last piece of this video that I find great is at the end, they're kind of like all confused about what happens. This in an interview happens more often than you think. A lot of candidates are asked a question, and instead of answering the question succinctly and directly, they see kind of that opening as their opportunity to pitch themselves. And by the time you're done talking, I even forgot what I asked you to start with. Remember, interviews, phone screens, we called you for a reason, right? So you do have to pitch yourself, but don't come off with desperation. Really listen first, talk second. So understand what your interviewer is asking of you. Answer the question he's asking or she's asking. Don't be afraid of telling the truth. Ultimately, if you're lying about something, it'll come up later in the interview somewhere, somehow. So tell the truth. It's okay to address gaps if they mention it. Don't bring up gaps if they don't bring it up. Showing that you're aware of where you might have a gap for the position doesn't always count for you. Make sure that you're keeping it positive, and how to address the areas of improvement question is also interesting, because many people will sort of address that like, oh, what's an area of improvement? Well, people tell me I'm a perfectionist. Like, all right, that's fine, but we know that's not a real answer. So, maybe you want to answer something tangible, like, I was struggling a little bit using the software, so I took an additional class and now I feel more confident in it. Like that's a good sort of thing that we can hang to. You will receive an offer at some point. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to negotiate. Don't be afraid to ask for more money if you'd like, but do it in a respectful, thoughtful way. It's totally okay to negotiate, but again, thoughtful and respectful. And recruiting agencies. So that's an interesting thing. Many recruiters will reach out to you. So I want you guys to understand sort of the nuances. I'm a corporate recruiter, which means that I work for Viacom. I'm inside Viacom. I'm an employee of Viacom, and I work for the company. There are recruiting agencies out there, and there's usually two types: retained and contingent. Contingent firms are recruiters who don't really care where you land as long as you land somewhere, because the minute that you get hired, they get paid. So they tend to not be as interested with kind of the right fit as much as they are about volume. So it starts feeling a little bit more like sales. So once you start posting on job boards, recruiters do go through the job boards and scrape them to see who's out there looking for a job. And they may reach out to you with all sorts of promises. So just be mindful of that. And there are great recruiters out there. So I don't want to, be negative about anything. There are really great recruiters. But just be mindful of that, again, wash it with common sense and understand that in many ways you are a paycheck to them. So don't be afraid to ask questions and kind of protect yourself a little bit. And if you can deal with internal recruiters, that's always ideal, because they are sitting inside the company. We talked about networking a little bit, so virtually via LinkedIn, but don't forget about real life. Go out there, go find social groups that have similar interests, talk to people. people who share your interests usually are more likely to push you forward in a position because they know that you're a like-minded individual that they'd like to work with. So go out there and find out what people are doing and what's going on, and put yourself out there and network. And then you want to continue to grow, address any gaps that you think you have, develop new skills, look for ways to learn. And somebody asked on the board, what if you don't have any skills in the area that you're applying to? And I, again, like this is more of a generalization, but there's always something that you can do. So one thing to keep in mind is you may not today qualify for the job that you want, but maybe that's not meant to be your next job. Maybe that's meant to be in 2 jobs. So what you have to do, and I went through it in my career too. I mean, as I mentioned, I went from pharmaceuticals to entertainment. I was sitting in the pharmaceutical industry and realized that I had a passion for music and I didn't want to be a musician. So I wanted to recruit in music. And a lot of doors closed in my face because they said, hey, you don't have entertainment or media experience. And so one way that I did it is I actually gave up a full-time senior level position to take a freelance role, which was a big risk, but to get the experience that I was lacking and learning a thing or two, because ultimately you want to try to translate the skills that you have today into the skills that they need for you to be hired. So it's on you to do that translation, and you can always develop the skills on the side, because one of the things that I do see that's unfortunate out there is there are people who want a certain job, but they don't do anything to develop the skills that they need, and they keep knocking on the same door. But the reality is, it doesn't matter how long you knock if you're always underqualified for that job. So you want to try to get those skill sets somewhere, somehow, and continue to grow. And it's usually more than 1 or 2 things. So if you do that process of looking at future jobs, more senior positions, what you'll find is there's probably skill sets that you didn't even know you needed that you could probably attain elsewhere. And volunteering is a great way to do it too. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that would welcome the help, and that becomes something that you can put on your resume. And another question that just came through is, how do you know what a corporate culture is like? Talk to people, do informational interviews, pick people's brains. Don't approach them and say, hey, I'm looking for a job, give me a job. But maybe you approach them and say, I'm really interested in what you do. Would you be open to just talking to me and teaching me, or just letting me know what your day-to-day is like? Don't be afraid to ask that question. People tend to like that. People like to be in a mentoring type position. So that's a great way to approach it. We're wrapping up, so we kind of went through this, a lot of content, and I hope most of you are still awake on the other side of this. If you have any questions, anything that you want, please shoot them now. And so questions, next steps. My information's on the bottom here, so just reach out. Don't be afraid to email me, and we can add you to the group. Continue to grow your network and make connections. So any questions? Let's open up the floor for anybody online, or Susan, if there's anything that I missed or anything that we need to address.
Thank you, Ralph. That was really great. So we'll pause for a minute where you can type any questions in if you have them. And in the meantime, I'd like to let all of the students on this presentation, as well as any of the alumni who are here in Tucson, know about our career panel that's tomorrow night, which Ralph will be serving on. It's Careers in Entertainment, and we have a really awesome lineup of people who kind of touch on different areas of entertainment, from a makeup artist to a tour manager to a hiring manager and more. So that is tomorrow night, Tuesday night, in the Student Union, 5:30 p.m. in the Catalina Room.
All right, so some questions are coming in. So let's see that. How much time do we have questions?
Well, I mean, you can just go till you're comfortable.
Okay.
Let's do 10 minutes.
All right. So a question that just came through. How many years in the future should you plan? Great question. There is no number. Think of it not in years, but in career steps. So if you think of, and this was, I mean, I keep going back to this because this was probably the most impactful thing for me that landed me in my position, was think of it as being 5 jobs ahead. So if you draw your plan, what are the next 5 jobs that you want, and ultimately start from the dream job and work backwards, that should give you a good kind of approximate timeline.
So I have a question for you, Rolf, it's a little bit more specific about LinkedIn profiles. Do you look up everybody that you're considering interviewing for a job?
It's a good question. We do and we don't. So most hiring managers will look up somebody's profile, and most hiring managers will ask for the profile. So not every recruiter will look you up on LinkedIn, unless we found you on LinkedIn. Then obviously we've looked at your profile. But if I see your resume come through the portal, I may not necessarily look you up on LinkedIn, but the hiring manager who will be interviewing you for the position, almost everyone I work with tends to look you up. So you want to make sure that your public profile is representative of what you want to do.
And do you like to see a summary section on the LinkedIn profile or a catchy headline, that kind of thing?
Catchy headlines tend to be a little bit corny. We see those quite a bit. Summaries are good. The thing with summaries, it's a little bit like objectives, right? Where if your summary is serving, I don't know if any of you are pre-law or have gone to law school or anything, but there's a concept in law school which basically says that whenever you write a legal document, almost every word on the document should serve a purpose. Think of that same concept on your resume, that if you're writing a summary, what's the purpose of the things that you're writing? And if you have a summary, make sure that it's focused and somewhat specific, because what we do see on a lot of summaries is that it's somebody telling us like every single thing that they like, and I might read it and think to myself, well, this seems like a really great person, but what do I do with them? So summaries are good, but again, they have to reflect the story that you're trying to say. It's a very interesting question that we just got about what if your major seems less ambitious? How do you make it appear on your resume that you're willing to work hard? There is no such thing as a less ambitious major. And I know it sounds like a cheesy answer, but the fact that you took on something and finished it and graduated, that's ambitious enough. And keep in mind that very few positions out there look at majors. So there's a degree requirement. And there are some positions that will say degree required, degree in communication preferred. So your major won't count against you. And one way that you can sort of overcome the major thing, especially if you're in a situation where your major is not fully in line with what you want to do, is to list or talk about projects or classes that you've taken that you feel are more relevant to the career that you seek. I was a Soc major. So, as a Soc major, it's sort of like, sometimes someone might ask me a question like, what, they didn't let you graduate with undecided, so you went with Soc? But I was actually passionate about sociology, and I was passionate about, the things around me, but I also found a way to apply sociology to what I wanted to do. So I had a minor in psych, and so the combination of the two was sort of the nature and then nurture piece, which kind of led me to human interaction and human resources. And let's do this as the last question, because I think it's probably a great way to close this. Somebody just asked, how do you exactly find your dream job if you're not sure what you're really interested in? That is a great question, and that's a fantastic question because it's completely unfair for me to ask you tonight, what do you want to do for the next 10 years of your life, when most of you don't even know what you're going to have for dinner or lunch tomorrow. So it's not about having just one plan, but it's about being focused in what you seek. So research. One exercise that helped me a lot in determining what I wanted to do is to put yourself in a mindset where you can kind of break free from your own mind telling you not to do something, and go on company sites. Think of, what are you passionate about? What are the things that you do in terms of like your hobbies? How do you spend your time? If you could do anything in the world, whether it's paid or not paid, don't think about all these things, but think about what would you be doing, or what are the fields or things that interest you. So for me, for example, music was one of those things, and talking to people like all of you was another thing that came up. And so I had to find a way to kind of string it in. And so you find kind of the industry or the general sort of field that you want to be in, and then you go on identifying kind of the top 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 companies in that field. Go on their job sites, don't apply to anything, but read all the job descriptions that are there. And it's super tedious and it requires a level of commitment. But one thing that you can do, and that I found very helpful, was take a piece of paper, split it in half, things that you like, things that you don't like. When you read a job description, on one side, put the things that you like. On the other side, put the things that you don't like. And next to that comment, try to remember what field that job, the qualification came from. Because ultimately what you're going to do after you read 20 or 30 or 40 job descriptions, you're actually creating your dream job description without having to know a title or an industry or anything. And then once you have that, you can take it and look at it and say, man, all the things that I really want to do fall in marketing, or they fall in communication, or they fall in psychology. And I actually wanted to do it for Doctors Without Borders and not for Nike, right? So that's a good exercise. It takes time and it takes commitment, but I find that putting in that time up front really helps down the road. So learn, research, that's one way to go. Talk to people, reach out to people like Susan, reach out to people like me, find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, email me. We can always try to put you in touch with people who might be able to help you out. There are workshops out there that can help you do this stuff too. And there's so many things. There's so much at your disposal that hopefully we can try to help you kind of guide you in finding your dream job eventually. So on that note, thanks everybody for coming. I'm super pumped to be here, and hopefully we'll see some of you or all of you tomorrow evening. And again, find me, email me, LinkedIn, grow your network. Pleasure being here.
Thank you so much, Ralph. Hopefully we'll see some of you who are on this webinar tomorrow night. And thank you for joining us. Check out the upcoming webinars too. Maybe there's something else you'd like to participate in.